It was tough. I remember being turned down from a lot of jobs just for not having that proper credential. But you know what? I guess you can say I went about it the hard way. I'm glad I did though. I have no student loan to show for it, and I've created a very successful business in the process. At an early age, I grew to have a passion for the arts. I loved illustrations, comic books, poetry, and photography. Just the idea of creating something out of nothing and seeing art come to life was something of a euphoria. You can say I grew up on that. And I'm glad you brought up the bias when it comes to not having the formal education in this industry. That absolutely does exist, and I've experienced it firsthand. After high school, I made a very difficult decision against my parents' wishes to not attend college.
Hello, welcome back to another electrifying episode of the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik Rutmann. Today we are diving into visual storytelling and brand communication with Kei Chan. He's a freelance presentation designer with over 2 decades of experience in corporate agency settings and with experience working with Fortune 500 companies. Kei's expertise lies in elevating brand communication through creative visualization and impactful design, simplifying the messaging for maximum audience retention. So we are learning how to transform your brand story into a visual masterpiece that captivates and retains your audience. So you don't want to miss this episode. So if you're now new to this episode and our show, please write a review, what you think, and the topics you'd like to hear more about. And obviously, I always enjoy when people are subscribing or give a recognition that my valued guest and myself, that we created value for you. So, Kei, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam-Erik. Let's just hope that you've made a good decision with inviting me on your podcast, because we don't know how this is going to go.
Well, I'm not worried. You're an old pro, so this is going to be great. I'm the newbie here, so you have done so many times before. So, but I think what Kei will be interesting to learn about your background and tell about your professional experience and why you found that chimeric presentation.
Right. Okay. I did find chimeric presentation. Funny enough, I was self-taught in the field, and I didn't go through the typical process of a higher education. I just felt it was unnecessary for me personally. I founded Chimeric simply because there's such a need for presentation design in the market. There are, I'd say, hundreds of thousands of graphic designers across the globe. And out of those, maybe just a few thousand that create presentations using the proper tools. And out of those few, maybe only a few hundred that will do it correctly. I will say, however, that this market is starting to get saturated. You will see that the other extreme, where contractors offer this type of service, but have little to no experience in the design field. Ultimately, it can be unfair to the consumer, which is why it's beneficial to do your homework before hiring someone to do your presentations. You should always interview your designers and get to know their portfolio.
Very important. Yeah. Excellent. That's a number one tip already in the first minutes of our episode. So thanks, Kei, for that. You say self-taught success. You mentioned that you are entirely self-taught and didn't go to college in an industry where formal education is often emphasized. People always ask, where did you study and where's your degree from? And that gives evidently credibility. But how did you overcome those challenges, meaning and biases that are associated with being self-taught?
It was tough. I remember being turned down from a lot of jobs just for not having that proper credential. But you know what? I guess you can say I went about it the hard way. I'm glad I did though. I have no student loan to show for it, and I've created a very successful business in the process. At an early age, I grew to have a passion for the arts. I loved illustrations, comic books, poetry, and photography. Just the idea of creating something out of nothing and seeing art come to life was something of a euphoria. You can say I grew up on that. and I'm glad you brought up the bias when it comes to not having the formal education in this industry. That absolutely does exist, and I've experienced it firsthand. After high school, I made a very difficult decision against my parents' wishes to not attend college. I was a firm believer that creativity couldn't be taught. Um, I may, you know, I may be the few that think that way, but I firmly believe so. Number one, I already had the talent, and really the only two things missing were the experience and the software skills. So to learn the software, I invested all my money into purchasing licenses and books associated with those applications, and I just buried myself in them. I also committed myself to very, and I mean very, low-paying jobs for several years within the design industry. I figured this was a good way to gain experience while teaching myself relevant applications at the time, like Quark and Flash. You know, other applications I can't even remember now because it's so dated. Um, I'm sure I'm aging myself with this admission. I'd imagine no one uses them now, but they're very prominent during those times.
Yeah. Well, I think when you mentioned that you took low-paying jobs initially, it kind of reminds me of the industry I'm from hospitality, and where you have apprentice programs and you're a trainee. I mean, I've been a trainee 3 times in different companies because I felt that I like to be working in an environment where you can learn something from other people and you have a chance to get better in what you do.
Absolutely.
And also, I mean, you already have you mentioned your passion from your childhood for creating something out of nothing, and it has then driven your career, and then uh, willing to take the risk of take your own way has turned out anyway for the better. But one of the things that always interests me with people who are artists or creators, how to maintain a passion and keep up it from turning into just another gig or another job. How do you approach that?
um, yeah, I mean it's different for everyone, but honestly, it's hard to say. So design is always evolving. There are new ways to design and develop that are being uncovered every day. I'd like to think that I contribute to that with almost every project that I work on. Sometimes it's not just about creating something that drives me, though. I still find it fun, don't get me wrong. More often than not, it's the challenge of finding new ways to design, or um, the challenge of finding a different path to get from A to B that keeps my mind as curious as the first day I put pencil to paper.
That's fantastic. I mean, this is really in any creative work or any profession is that you have that passion and willing to take the uh, unknown paths that maybe no one has stepped before or very few people have stepped before. So I think that's a very uh, I think that's another golden nugget number two at least already for that people who are listening in, and also they can as a takeaway in the hospitality profession. But you mentioned that you started in your traditional design tools like Quark and Flash. I'm familiar with Flash, but Quark I'm not. What was the most difficult part of transitioning to other tools or maybe modern digital tools, and how do you keep up with those rapid changes? You say they are changing all the time.
Yeah. I mean, the industry right now is always evolving and always adding to it. Right now, back in the day, the only thing that you could really work off to create a website was, say, like a Notepad or Dreamweaver. Today, you have
Yeah.
a plethora of platforms that you can use that is made simpler for you. Um, anyway, that is a great question. While Quark and Flash can be considered traditional, they're still digital platforms. I grew up at a time when internet wasn't even invented yet. My initial transition into the industry was really from illustrations, painting, and print photography. These were very hands-on and very manual. You can say that my curiosity and my patience allowed me to tap into the digital space. I just took it day by day, really. I guess you can say that the most difficult part was remaining patient. That was very difficult. When internet was at its
Yeah.
infancy, all I wanted to do was, create more art on screen. It was tough. Things were done the hard way. The technology then can't even compare to what's available today. Um, I, yeah, so back to what I said, a great example of that is, website design. I remember coding for hours on Dreamweaver, just to make fonts appear
Yeah.
correctly on screen. Today's
Yeah.
technology like WordPress, Figma, Squarespace, Wix, I mean, the list goes on. Um, they make doing these things so much simpler. Obviously, not simple enough to make you a designer overnight, but they're incredible tools for designers. I guess to answer your questions, it's really the drive and curiosity to understand better and faster ways to create that keeps me up with the rapidly changing technology. I am just naturally curious and drawn towards it.
Wonderful. So you have designed for very large companies, and from your credentials, you have worked with the Fortune 500 companies. Can you share some insights how it is to work with these kind of companies, and what were some maybe the biggest challenges and triumphs in those roles when you dealt with the kind of the caliber of companies where they are that they are?
Sure. I mean, I can name three off the top of my head that I've had experience with. Uh, let's see, Consigli, I was part of. CVS, I was a part of. Hasbro, I was a part of.
Oh,
And I can say unequivocally that the most challenging aspects of working in corporate was probably the bureaucracy. Um, Things needed to get done, but the problem was that it always had to go through all the appropriate channels and permissions before it landed on my desk. And at which time, we're now only days from deadline. So I guess you can understand, like, that's the impact it had on my trade. A good
yeah.
scenario to consider is with my previous job at Hasbro. We initiate almost every project a year in advance. One of the biggest events we cover is San Diego Comic-Con. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but for those that don't know, this is probably the most coveted convention that takes place every summer. Tickets sell out pretty much as soon as it's made available. And for an entire year, this event project would um, initially get kickstarted and then go through all the necessary channels like logistics, marketing, legal, and then ultimately, finally, it will land on design. And when it did finally reach my desk or design desk, I was art directing for the entirety of Boys Brand at the time, which covers high profile IPs such as Transformers, Star Wars, Marvel, Beyblade,
Oh,
G.I. Joe, Nerf. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of these, right? Really, pretty much
all of
all
them.
of Boys
Yes.
Brand. Um, anyway, by the time it hits my desk, I only have 2 months to design, direct, and implement creatives against the allotted floor space, and with only a $4,000 budget for each IP. So when you consider,
Oh no.
I mean, we're talking about like anywhere between 8 to 10 brands, and I have about, let's just say, less than 2 months to work on it with the smallest budget possible. Possible. um, I mean, you know, uh, I don't even get me started on just the amount of emails and meetings that goes in between as well, because that was tiresome. But yeah, I'd say something like that is the toughest aspect of working in corporate, which I'm sure a lot of the listeners can relate. I'll tell you though, triumph isn't the reward of your work coming to life though. It's absolute
Mm.
bliss to see your hard work in full display. It's undescribable.
Yeah.
I love the feeling, and I strive for it every time I design.
Okay. Excellent. Hospitality industry. Any well, you're not directly in the hospitality industry, and maybe you can share if you have done some design work for hospitality industry. uh, I would be interested to know what you think are the biggest visual communication challenges that you have seen, particularly for hotels, and how can they improve their brand presentation to attract more customers. Are they jaded in a way in the hospitality industry compared to the other industries that you are designing to, or have you seen some excellence that you think that has inspired you, or you can give some sort of tips or in terms of the approach?
Um, I'll tell you what, the best way to attack it is to hire me.
Yeah, there you go.
But all jokes aside, I think, and it's not with just the hospitality industry, but I think the biggest problem is the big picture. They're so focused on it. So many companies I've worked with, and this includes names like Hilton and Marriott. They have been my client. They are my client. So so many companies are so focused on the big picture of their brand appeal that they forget the finer things that are more relatable to the audience they're trying to attract. Um, I would say the devil is in the details, and sometimes we forget that as a service that specializes in hospitality, we should probably focus more on the things our patrons want or need rather than our reputation. Let's talk about how kid friendly our facility is, how the people you hire are vetted vigorously to meet your standards. Go into details about your cleaning process. Let's not just advertise your hotel restaurants, but maybe also boast about how your location is just a mile from the top rated steakhouse in the state, or how much your company just spent on a new renovation. Things like that. As a consumer, these are the things that would attract me.
Well put, because it is a constant issue in the industry that we are focusing on the big picture, and at the end of the day, the consumer or the person or the guest who's coming in for the first time to stay at the hotel, the first impression is the one that counts for them anyway, and it might be that memory that makes them come back one day. They're not interested in how beautiful the maybe the brand colors are, or there are some slogans. Hotel companies tend to change their slogans once in a while, and I'm always surprised about those slogans. What do they really mean? Is it more meaningful for the marketing department, or does really somebody using them does the consumer respond to those things? That's a question mark for me. I could never figure that out, but I worked for those companies myself, and I always remember that these slogans they kind of sound a little bit weird because I couldn't relate to them, and I'm supposed to be, and I'm in the company working for them, so it was quite interesting times. But what leads me to sort of that uh, creative briefs and communication you are going through, what are maybe some most common mistakes that uh, clients make when they're providing briefs for design projects? What are the things that you have noticed, and where you're faced, that you have to deal with?
Um, Honestly, I think a great designer will know how to guide you in your communication. I don't have a lot of clients that give me bad briefs. Um, I do have clients that give me bad responses, or delayed responses. I mean, maybe
Yeah,
work on that.
yeah.
But I'd like to think that every designer is different and each of our preferences vary significantly. But a strong designer will know how to help you communicate. You know, I like
Yeah.
working with you, and the thing is, it's not a one-way street. I mean, it needs to go back and forth. What I want, what you want, and we need to work together on it. And it goes the same with how we deliver our ideas. Um, so really, what you're looking for is not how to deliver a brief, but rather you're looking for a designer who's capable of adhering or at least helping you deliver that brief. I mean, uh, full full disclosure on, like, the whole umbrella of what it is that you should and shouldn't do. um I think the only thing that we ask as designer is, please do not assume that any certain task is simple or easy. Despite its appearance, they're often not very simple. And I guess be mindful of our schedule. While we have an agreement to work on your project and to have it done at a certain time, which we usually will, you're most likely not the only client we're working with simultaneously. So if you inject more project in the middle of a project, you know, you have to understand that we're not exclusively working with you. We'd have to push other projects aside. And let's see, I'm sorry. I guess the only other thing is, be assertive in your decisions. We tend to like working with a single contact or a single decision maker. I'll tell you, Sam-Erik, I've I fired clients in the past where they kept going back and forth on decisions because there were too many decision makers with too many contrasting ideas. You know, sometimes that can't be helped, and sometimes that's just a bad relationship.
Yeah, and sometimes they see something new and they get inspired by that, and they say, "Well, you have to change this because this is what I saw. That's very exciting." Then you're in a
Yeah, I mean,
difficult
I'm
situation. I can
I'm
relate to
I'm
that.
always open to new ideas. Just be assertive, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So, as someone like you who is both an artist and a business person, how do you balance creativity with the often rigid demands of a business client? So you almost actually you answered it already, but maybe there's something else you have in mind because we haven't met really in person, but I can sense that and looking at your portfolio that you're a very creative person, but also then it comes the business side of things. How do you balance that if there is a decision that needs to be made?
Sure. I mean, I attack it the same way all my clients do. There are aspects of my business where I don't even touch, like the financials and the overheads. Those are absolutely things that I would outsource. I don't want to touch them. I don't find inspiration from them. So, there are people far better than me at doing those that I'd rather just offhand to them. Much the same are my clients who outsource designs to me. I like to leave and trust it to the professionals. Um, Satisfying rigid demands is really just a part of my job. I actually invited. I mean, I'm assuming this is the question you were really asking. So satisfying the rigid demands um, is really just a part of the job. I invited because I mean I'd like to think that's what I'm here for, and I'm great at it.
Very good. Looking at the future of design, if there's a way to even have that conversation, in your opinion, what are the emerging trends in design that businesses, especially in hospitality, should be aware of and possibly integrate into their branding and marketing strategies? It's a very big question, but if you have some thoughts that comes to your mind, that could be very helpful to see what were your thoughts on that.
It is a very broad topic, and it's quite a challenge to answer because obviously design is always evolving. Um, I mean,
Yeah,
I'd like to think it's um, I'd like to think like if you in think in terms of approach and trends, and maybe it's not exactly trends, but I'd like to think it's from the way marketing has changed. I'm not certain about the hospitality industry per se, but I think it would be beneficial to market at a local level. I believe that procuring insights from a local branch with all the minor details at that location involves trusting your managers to hire the right consultation for the specific needs for that local area. Um, Honestly, proper delegation and trust is the new trend in design and branding.
yeah, of course, of course. Now there are a lot of people out there who are listening to this podcast since they know that that we have this discussion and there are some aspiring designers. What advice would you give to a young designer who are just starting out, especially those who may not have access to formal education but are passionate about learning and growing in the field?
I'll tell you, in the age of social media, the newer generations have so many tools available to help them get started. Far better tools than what I started with. So it should be at least
Yeah,
easier. Um, that being said, easier doesn't make it achievable. Stay passionate, stay dedicated, and challenge yourself always. Search for designs online and practice improving it. Find faster ways to design
yeah,
from
yeah.
you know from A to B. Uh, I have mentioned earlier how I think creativity can't be taught. I will firmly attest with all my heart that it can be learned. So
Mm,
you just have to keep that drive and passion.
yeah, very good. Then comes to my mind is now everybody talks about artificial intelligence, how there are all kinds of apps and tools that actually creates some sort of a design based on the very long prompts and so on. Have you tested this kind of things out, and how does it
I
work
have.
for you?
I think AI, personally speaking, because I'm not full-fledged into it, but I am very curious about it. Um, Personally, think my personal perspective of that is that AI helps people like me, but it doesn't help people like my clients. So
Oh,
yeah,
explain.
AI requires you to be very, very descriptive in what it is that you want. A lot of my clients aren't. You still have to know how to
You're
you
right.
still have to know how to navigate the tools, and the easiest process
Yeah.
would really be going through the proper channels of finding a designer who, if you insist on using AI, have a designer use AI rather than have yourself go through all that process, all that headache of perhaps doing something wrong. Trust me, it'll take you longer to work with AI than to have somebody who knows it to do it.
I love that answer. But so I have two more questions before we wrap up. One question I like to ask my guest. Besides what we have talked about, uh, you travel a lot. You have clients everywhere. In terms of hospitality, you see some trends that the hotels should take note of. If so, what are they?
Oh, what you should take notice of is poor design. Um, the thing
Yeah.
is that while you may think that your word is getting out there, the quality of what you're advertising um, can affect the impression of what your patrons have about you. Um, so really, what I'm trying to say is spend a little more money on great quality design and marketing. Um, I mean, think of it as an investment. You know, do your research and make sound judgment on deciding who you want to work with on your project. I'm doubting this is something that is trending, but it should be noted that hotels and resorts tend to partner with big budget excursion companies and restaurants with redundant, flashy advertising. Sometimes all your patrons really want are local dives and activities that are unknown to that that are often missed by travelers. Spend a little more time on researching some local mom and pop shops and help advertise them to your guests. Design pamphlets with itineraries that cater to low budget activities and dining experiences. The less money they spend out there will leave room for your guests to spend with you, right? That kind of makes sense,
Yeah,
right?
that's a very good advice because this is typically that I also like to. I mean, I'm thinking of myself when we are traveling. I always like to explore and try to find new things and go to some local restaurants where I haven't been before, and just to explore that. And typically here, I was spending our holiday in Finland, and we drove to an area which I haven't been for. It's only about less than 2 hour drive, and we ended up at the strawberry farm. They are you can buy the strawberries, the seasonal strawberries. It's one of the best experience of the whole holiday was not because of the strawberry alone, but the atmosphere at the cafe that they had, and
Absolutely.
and the couple that runs the farm, and they are on Facebook. So okay, so I'll follow them, and they are very active, and they have creating all kinds of tips of the different varieties that are coming out. And I thought, hey, this is one of the best things I never thought of I would enjoy, but it was a fantastic experience. And then they also gave tips. Oh, by the way, since you're here, there's actually a local market that is going on. So why don't you go and take a look what they're doing? And that actually made our hotel, and that was not planned in advance even.
Absolutely. I can't stress enough. I mean, I travel a lot. I can't stress enough how many times I would ask a friend who stayed there or ask the hotel that stayed there, and the answers are vastly different. I would ask the
Yeah.
hotel, hey, what's a good place to eat? They'll answer something like, oh, there's a Ruth's Chris down the street that, you can enjoy if you like steak. And then
Yeah.
I would ask a friend who lived there, and they're like, oh yeah, there's like this really like really hidden hut that this mom and pop sell like these incredible steak sandwiches that you really got to try. I was like, I mean, that's not anywhere in any advertising. You know, this is what I'm
No.
trying to tell. This is what I'm trying to say. At least for your listeners, is that you'll be doing a great service for your patrons by including these types of areas that is very hidden, that is very local. you know, to travelers that are often missed.
Yeah, yeah. Very well. Okay, that has been a very good discussion. Now, people who are interested to contact you and find you, how can they do so? What are the ways they can reach you?
Oh, reach me through Sam-Erik.
There you go.
No, go.
Just contact me.
Gladly visit my website at chimeric.com. That's KHIMERIC.com. And you can communicate me with through the links that are provided on that website, or you can just reach out to me directly at k@chimeric.com. That's KAY.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also, for the listeners, I will put this in my show notes, so you will find, and also in the YouTube version of it, you will find those in the description, so you cannot miss it. So, okay, it's been a really good discussion, and thanks you very much for your fantastic insight.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Social Hotelier Show. Make sure to visit our website, the Social Hotelier Show, blueberry.net, where you can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, or via RSS, so you never miss a show. While you're at it, if you find value in this show, we appreciate a rating in Apple Podcast. Or if you simply tell a friend about the show, that will help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.